Well, this is still not easy, the aesthetic.
Yes.
We are also reading, the kindergarten, kind of how we are bringing the aesthetic to the classroom.
Yes.
And she was kind of like describing as a flow, like a flow of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And we were reading, but this is so study part describes so much about the asthma study and asthma renewal and weekend renewal. So we are always like skipping the study part.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, it's some of these ideals, I mean, I think sometimes the problem is they get too complicated. I like what he writes, but in a sense, I think he brings too much detail. And so you have to figure out how to fit that detail in a picture. And it's not always so easy when you got all that detail. I mean, he obviously has a great insight into the practical manifestation of the etheric. But sometimes when we read that, and if we don't have that insight, it just seems to be too much.
Yeah, that's very challenging.
Yes.
For me too. Yeah, read all about the breathing, and then kind of understand that go through the organs and then bringing back carbon dioxide.
Right.
But so what is really just what he said, and then I don't know how can I bring it to the relationship to
the child.
Yes. So.
Well, I mean, I think it's good to first really get a picture, and so we can address this in two ways. You can bring whatever picture is forming for you, and I can help flesh it out, or I could bring the picture I have, and then you could then see if it fits anything. So I have been, because of course I've been reading this, and I've been having to do that work myself, having to develop my own picture, so that I have a way of managing all those pictures.
I'm not really getting there to create the picture.
Right.
My understanding is not really like something I can create from that.
Right,
it's not there yet.
Right. So the one thing that's pretty obvious, and I think that we have this fourfold, and we're trying to bring a relationship between this fourfold and this sevenfold. And we can look at how he does that.
The sevenfold is
the seven systems, the seven life processes.
And the fourfold is etheric.
Right.
Yeah.
The physical, the etheric, the astral, and the ego. But he also has a fourfold etheric.
Yeah.
And so we want to feel our way to making a connection between the overall fourfold and the sevenfold life processes, and then the fourfold of the etheric that he brings, and that has to be integrated into that picture. So and then we have to then ask ourselves, when we're observing a child, how do these lenses, we've already used the fourfold lens before. And so you have some experience in observing children through the physical, the etheric, the astral, and the ego. And we want to make the etheric have more detail, because he brings the four kinds of etheric. And then we want to be able to connect that with the sevenfold lens of the life processes, so we can do some analysis and come to some picture of the child, the imbalance that may be in the child.
I think I was hoping that what I told you about the child, about who are kind of like a cosmic, but there's so much astral, and then can bring the form.
Right, exactly.
And if I can really, if you can help me to that kind of child, and then as a sample.
As an example, yeah. So these children who basically, like a lot of children right now, have this real tendency to be in balance in a cosmic way. But at the same time, their work is very earthy. It's visceral. And so we want to know, how is these sevenfold like processes that are developing going to be affected by this very cosmic children that we're meeting? Because in a way, that cosmic energy that the children are bringing is weakening the visceral process. I mean, the cosmic child is going to have a tendency to weaken the visceral development. Yes, because because in a way the energy of the etheric is already being pulled, away from the body a little bit.
Because of their cosmic.
Right, because of their cosmic orientation, or in some sense you could say it's not fully meeting with the mother's etheric that they've been giving. They're still living somewhat in the astral.
That makes sense. It's not fully incarnating.
Right, exactly. And so to really develop their true person, they have to get themselves more engaged in that early work in the visceral, and in a sense not be so oriented toward where they're coming from. So just to reiterate a little bit, to make sure that the details that he's given that you're really familiar with. So he gives the detail, of course, of the four etheric forces.
Yeah.
What's your experience of those? Did you kind of understand where he's coming from? He had the
hard one is light ether for me to understand. Other things, some read and then I can feel with my body, like a life ether, warmth ether, and then tone ether. Was it tone ether? What is the other one? I think it was tone, but no, chemical.
There's chemical. What was the first one? I got the first one. The life ether, chemical ether.
Yeah. And what is a tone ether? Is like a light ether, same as?
What's the word? Form?
Tone. The
Tone.
sound. Yeah. Tone is a light, same as light, including in a light, or?
Oh, that's interesting.
I
wouldn't normally keep the tone with the light.
Yeah, somewhere I think I heard tone, not other words. So.
Tone ether.
So what is a tone? Is which belonging to the light?
Which is more related to sound. The tone ether. I'm not really sure. I didn't. He doesn't use that.
Yeah.
He doesn't use the tone ether. I think I have heard that before also, but he doesn't use it in his writing.
Yeah. So when I read about his explanation about each short explanation, light ether, I'm still not really getting.
The idea that things appear and disappear?
Yeah. Yeah, also he talks about the I things, but it's not just that, right? So.
Well, right, it's not just that. It's the body itself. Like he talks about, the light ether is involved in the third life force, the breaking down. And the third life process where things are broken down, and so they disappear. He says the whole purpose of the third life process is to get what has come in to completely disappear.
Oh, okay. So that the one solid things we have, and then we take in, and then breaking down. So it's lose its own identity.
Right. Now, there's a really interesting aspect of this. He also talks about how when we take in things from nature, they still have etheric forces in them from the elementals.
Yeah.
And one thing that is happening, this is a very important point that is made. So you have this process, this physical process of breaking down, and when you break it down to the point where the life actually is released, that then joins with our etheric. So this is very important to understand.
Is that like example, like if a human body die and then when we bury and we go back to belong to the earth, that
Right.
kind of
Then our etheric is released.
yeah.
And it's the same thing here. When we take in nutrients and we break them down, we release etheric forces that we then can use. So nutrition is taking place not just physically, but etherically.
And then also, so that the release, the etheric force is assimilated to our body.
Right, exactly, because of part of our etheric. We actually make that etheric usable. So there are two things that happen. We break down the material that comes in, and in doing so, we release etheric, but also make it usable. So that's a very important thing. And we actually break things down more completely than animals do. He makes that point.
Mm-hmm.
When we break things down, because animals usually don't really, plants and animals don't really break it down so much that the etheric is fully gone. That's why manure and things like that can be used.
It was interesting, like a human manure doesn't have any nutrition
Right,
anymore.
it doesn't have any life. It doesn't have any etheric forces anymore. So this is really important.
We use a lot in Japan. They were using a lot of human things.
Is that right?
Yeah. And like Asia, China and Japan. Yeah.
So it's very important to understand then what's going on is that we're getting etherically replenished as well as physically replenished when we take in and break down. So it's not
most
just
complicated process we will do maybe when we eat something or breaking down those 7 processes.
Right.
But do the animals do process, but it's not all 7 or?
They just aren't.
Different
I
way.
think they are just not as complete, And it's probably going to become more clear where they're not complete because, in a sense, what we're trying to do is bring these 4 life forces to bear. And I think these 4 life forces are also associated with the elements. Remember, he did that. He showed the connection between the 4 etherics that we have and the earth, the water, the elementals. So basically, we can say that when we're using our chemical etheric is working in a life process, it's probably working in that life process to release the associated elemental. I don't know if you remember that. I got to find it, but he connects the elementals with each of these.
I remember he was kind of talking about, I didn't read the last about 15 pages, but I think before that, right?
It was before that, actually, yeah. Before the drawing part, maybe, I think.
That was in a 7 process or?
Well, no, it was before that. It was back before the
etheric part.
where he made a list of the 4 etheric forces, and then beside that list, he pointed out which elementals were associated. Here they are. It's on page 49.
Oh, okay.
No, hold up. Yeah. So
Yeah, I didn't have time to read it.
So 49. So the earth being, which is the life force, the life etheric, is associated with the known. And the chemical ether, which is related to the water beings, the nymphs and undines. And then the astral or the air beings are associated with the light, are associated with the fairies and sylphs. And then the one being with the salamanders. And so that means that these elementals, which are we're taking them in, when we eat and releasing them, and we'll probably find later when we read that the ether associated with them is the one that is working and working on whatever we bring in that holds that elemental being. And that's probably going to be important, in terms of nutrition, because you got to ask yourself, we think of nutrition as not just meaning the physical part that we take in, but it's also meaning the elemental beings that we take in and that we're releasing for our uses. And we probably got to have a certain balance in that. And so that means that you have to have a certain balance in the use of these etheric forces so that you, which are going to be working on the physical nutrition you bring in, to release the elemental beings that you need to incorporate in your own being or body.
So that's also a great breaking down process.
Right.
We release that.
And we release those in the breaking down process. So that's an important thing because I think that gives a different definition of nutrition. And I think it's an important definition of nutrition, that nutrition involves us taking in elemental beings in the breaking down part.
Well, this is interesting also, using elemental beings, we didn't really think about that kind of relationship.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now the other thing that I think that's important here, and this is before this chapter, but it's important to understand, is so he talks about how the etheric forces provide the design for the organization of the body. He talked about that before, toward the beginning. That we have these physical things that come into the body, what he called the substances, and then he said the substances are organized, to build the body up by the etheric forces. Now that contradicts science, because science talks about DNA being the design and that drives the organization of the substances. And so I think it's important to resolve that conflict. And the picture that I have is that it's like putting a puzzle together. When you put a puzzle together, you got all these puzzle pieces. Now, the puzzle pieces are already cut to fit together in a certain way. But you have to organize those pieces to make it possible to really get those pieces together. Even though they're already designed or cut to go together, you have to do certain processes to be able to put, like you got to find all the corner pieces. You got to find all the pieces that look like they're blue that maybe go to this part. So in a way we can say that's the work of the etheric. When you put the puzzle together, you get the DNA is what already cut the pieces.
Oh, okay. DNA is doing this job. I was trying to ask you. So who's doing the piece already?
Yeah, the DNA is the one that has already cut the pieces into. So we know they fit together, but we still have to fit them together and organize that. That's the etheric part. So that's how the etheric and the DNA are both involved in the design. You have the DNA setting the shape of the pieces so that they ultimately can fit together to make the puzzle. But you have the human being who then organizes the pieces into corner pieces, into the blue pieces, the pieces that go for this part, and all of that. And you can think a little way, there's a way to think about that as being organ formation. That's what organ formation is. So even though, so the tissues and all of that, the substance that put the organs together, that's given by the DNA. But then you have this part that actually says these parts go over here, these parts go with the corners. That's really when you're forming the organs. And then you end up with a whole system that actually works. So,
that says that takes for 7 years.
Right.
To do that.
Right. The difference is you got to understand that there's a physical DNA part that's setting the design, but there's also this other etheric part.
Yeah.
Just like when you put a puzzle together. And the part that we call the etheric part in the puzzle is similar to the actual organ formation itself. Like you can say, putting all the puzzle pieces, the corner pieces together, is like an organ. That's an organ. Putting all of the things that are blue together is an organ. So you can say that all of these ways that you may categorize the pieces before you start putting them together is the same thing as forming an organ in the body.
So is that he was talking about the liver, how liver first brought this, he was kind of like talking about how liver gonna get complete.
Right.
So are you talking about that process?
I'm saying that, it's like the process of, say, the reason we have organs is the same reason that we have different categories of puzzle pieces. Because without those different categories, putting the puzzle together can't happen. So the human being can't really function without having different parts of our physical substance that are sorted into different categories. And so that sorting that takes place, which is done by the etheric, because the sorting is the central life process. And that sorting which is done is what really ends up forming the organs and making sure you know what tissue goes to what. Yeah. And it's just like when we sort the pieces of a puzzle.
So that's another thing is also the process of putting piece together. This is maybe look like a blue sky, so you find the blue one just put there, and then later you really fit. But
right. And so that's the work of the etheric, and that's the primary life process of sorting, making those pieces, choosing, making, like he says, making the choices, choosing what pieces are going to go where. So therefore, setting the stage for forming the organs of the puzzle that our body is. So I think that as we go forward, those are going to be the two most important concepts. The first concept is that what the body really is doing when it takes things in and goes through the life processes, it's releasing elemental beings for its own use. That's basically what the process is. When we take stuff in, adapt, because here's the seventh process being taking stuff in, adapting, breaking down. The next one that goes with taking in, growing. And growing after that one? Yeah. Which one we got? Oh, maintaining, growing, and then of course producing new being. And so, and he says that. So really, he already has a fourfold picture, because he puts sorting at the top, and then he pairs these other two. He pairs the rest of them.
And in the middle is
sorting.
Sorting.
So you have sorting, then you have each of these in pairs. So sorting. And then you have taking in and maintaining, that's a pair. Then you have adapting and growing. And then you have, not taking in, breaking down. Breaking down and maintaining. And then you have adapting and growing. And then taking in and bringing into being. So really that's only four right there. So that fourfold will be associated with the etheric. With the four etheric. Each of them will be associated with the etheric. So that gives a kind of a simplicity right there.
I remember he wrote about it. Pairing things.
I think it's like on 90 or 80 or something like that.
Oh, yeah, this one. Yeah.
And so in reality, we just have these fourfold. And he's already talking about how each of these was associated with one of the etheric forces. And so this is going to be associated on this side with the same etheric force. And so we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have 4 etheric forces.
And then you said that, light ether is breaking down. This is a light ether, does it?
Mm-hmm. Because it was disappearing and appearing.
So
so these two go together. It's probably disappearing and appearing, but actually maybe I'm not really sure, because it seems like this Now he said that when he did taking in, adapting was the warmth ether, and taking in was it was a chemical ether. Right?
Oh, okay. So this is a life? No.
It's kind of funny that it would be light, but I think it might be, which is kind of backwards. You think it would be backwards, wouldn't it? He talked about sorting before. What did he say about sorting? Because he talked about sorting at the beginning.
Yeah, he does.
And and I think it is. I think it is associated with the life ether. Because the ultimate sorting is what is alive and what is dead. That's the ultimate sorting category.
Okay.
But let me go back and look at that because I don't remember.
I thought that was it. This is also like taking in and bringing. So taking in and bringing into it. Which one is that?
Well, taking in, and this is bringing into being, bringing something new into being.
So that's not life ether?
Well, if I'm going to go back and look, because I think he associated taking in.
And I felt that sorting is more like a chemical or water. No, it's not.
Well, see, remember this one? Taking in was, the life ether was, okay, the chemical ether is binding and unbinding. That's binding and unbinding. And the light, that's what you do. That's what happens that's the process that happens in the chemical ether. Is binding and unbinding.
The blood clot, he said that I sometimes make the blood clot.
Right, because it binds it up too much.
Yeah.
So binding and unbinding. And I didn't think that adapting was that one, so let me look again. Yeah, the life ether is bringing to life and leading to death. So that would make sense that it would be bringing into being. So this won't be the life ether.
This is life, yeah.
Because that's what it does. It brings things into being and takes things out of being.
Yeah.
And so it's
This is a light ether breaking down, and adapting is a warm ether.
Yeah.
So the sorting is chemical ether.
Chemical ether, yeah. So let me look at this again. Let me taking in the first life process. The first life process allows some substance into the organism. So its rhythm is the most important thing, but rhythm is usually associated with the chemical ether. He isn't very clear in that chapter. Yeah, see, he doesn't say clearly. He says clearly in the other ones which one is related, but he's unclear in this one. He only talks about rhythm. He talks about rhythm, but he doesn't use the actual term. And I have only read up to the end of this chapter, so I haven't read a little bit more. You may be aware of something that I haven't read.
I think I read just after the seventh life process, and then he goes back to etheric, talking about the etheric again after that. So. Oh, he talks about the upper and the lower
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at that a little more, but that's really not essentially what we need to
Mm-hmm.
work with right now anyway. I think what because basically we have 4 of these sessions, so I think it'd be good to try to not do the whole book at one time.
Yeah.
But the question is what I was wanted to do is try to get a big picture today, and we can work on the details later. So let me just ask again, that picture I just brought, when we look at the child, then we have to know that the child is made up of these physical substances. And we know that those substances are actually being made less and less, the life is being taken out of them by the nutrition process, so that the etheric in them can be released. And that etheric then being released, joining with the other etheric forces, is used to then sort and form the organs that are necessary for this human being. So we have these living tissues coming in. They're being broken down so that the life is devoid of them, but that life then becomes a part of our life, part of our etheric. And then the etheric itself has the purpose of then sorting and guiding all of that in the way that it's going to be used for our being. I mean, that's the big picture. So when we look at the child, we got to. I'm saying that's the image we should carry when we look at the child. I should see that the child, and taking in is different ways. Taking in through all the senses, because it's the senses that connect the child with the environment. The child is taking in all of the stuff, and really, when the child takes it in, the next part of the child is doing is taking all the life out of it. Or you can say it's taking all the life for its own purposes. It pulls the life forces out of everything it brings in. And those life forces then become a part of its life forces. Then its life forces takes all of those substances that's now devoid of life and organizes them to create its own being, its own organ system. So do you follow that picture?
So yeah, can you tell me again the middle part? I kind of missed the middle part. First taking in and then
well, we didn't talk about adapting. Adapting is sort of like doing something to the material that matches the warmth force, the warmth organization. So if something comes in, it could be cold, and then it's going to be warmed up, or it could be hot, it needs to be cooled down, because it wants to match the warmth organization of the human being. So that's the second phase, is adapting it so it fits in our system. Once it fits in our system, then the process of breaking it down starts happening. There's 2 things he talks about. There's always 2 things that happen. And so in this case, the 2 things that are happening is that the substance that came in is disappearing. And it's being broken down into something which is more neutral. But in the same process, its life forces are being taken out. So the life forces...
The materials, the substances, life forces taken out.
Its life forces are being taken out. So you're getting 2 kinds of nutrition. We're creating this neutral substance that we're going to be able to use, and we're taking the life force out to be able to use it too. So those 2 things happen in the breaking down process. So that the life that comes in disappears. It disappears. That life no longer exists because we have separated its life from the substance. So now both the substance and the life force can be used by us.
Yeah.
So so the child firstly has to strive to do that. The child has to take in the material, it has to adapt it, and then it has to break it down so that the life forces that it's brought in, and this is not just true of food. When you think of food, this is true of everything that's coming in to the child's senses, into their eyes, into their ears, You know, they're having to do these three things to it all. And so as teachers, as we're watching the children, we can ask ourselves, when we bring something to the children, how easy is what we bring able to be worked on by these three processes? You know, can they just take it in initially? You know, can they adapt to it? Is it something that they can adapt? Are we bringing it in too cold? Are we bringing it in too warm? And then, can they extract whatever is living in it? You know, we bring living curriculum, and we're expecting the children to be able to take that living curriculum away and use it for its own purposes.
So you're talking about the processes, taking in and adapting and
breaking down.
Breaking down.
Right. So we just have, I'm just saying, we got to have a really clear image of those in regard to when we see the child in the classroom.
Yeah.
We have to know that the child is doing those three things in regard to what we're bringing.
So I think that I was a little confused about. Okay, that's right. Adapting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so when I'm trying to make this relevant for looking at the child, we're seeing the child in the classroom, we're bringing curriculum, and we got to know that they're going to be working on the curriculum, just like they work on food or anything, through these three processes initially, making the curriculum usable for their maintenance, their growing, and their bringing into being. But they're going to be doing these three first processes. And the result of these processes is twofold. It replenishes their own life forces, like you said. We have to provide strength in the etheric. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're talking about, bringing curriculum that has etheric forces in it that the children can then extract and use for their own work. Mm-hmm. And what's left over from that, then the etheric forces are going to sort that and to use it in their bodies in ways that build up their organs. So it's like, you know,
so that which part is that maintaining part is
now that comes after, of course, it's been broken down. It goes through the sorting, and then the sorting will send the materials to whatever part of the body that it needs to go through to maintain those organs, to maintain those processes. That's why sorting will be next, and sorting is essential. Sorting is right there between breaking down and maintaining. It breaks down, it gets these substances, it gets the new etheric forces, and then it uses those etheric forces itself to then move those new substances where they need to be in the body, so that the body can be maintained.
So that is the puzzle part.
Right, in the sense of the puzzle, it's actually beginning to organize those pieces where they need to be at, so that the puzzle can be put together, sorting it all out. That's the etheric forces. They sort it all out, and then they send everything to where it needs to be at, so the body can be maintained. And so I think that picture, I think, is a good place to start. Now we need to be able to answer the detailed questions, really more on this side. On the other side, what does it mean in the growing? We've got to answer the detailed processes. What etheric forces is it using, and for what part of, the life processes? And ultimately, you should be able to ask questions, how can we observe when there's an imbalance in those etheric forces? Say if the child has a lack of chemical ether, or a lack, of life ether, we should be able to observe something, and that should tell us what life process may be compromised because of that. So that would be our purpose in the end, is to be able to, through observation of the child, be able to say, what life process seems to be compromised. And if a certain life process is compromised, what sort of maybe etheric force is the child not getting? Mm-hmm. And so what can we bring differently to support that?
So and then growing and then
bringing into being.
So we can see bringing into being is like the imitation is all the process they do once we do like a circle, mm-hmm. and then and then the bringing into being is like imitation.
Well, no, I wouldn't. I think the imitation is actually part of the way they're working on themselves. I mean, when children act in the world, that's like the etheric forces are working on the body. So when children are actually being active and we see external activity, but that external activity is a result of these efforts to work on themselves, and then after working on themselves, and then something emerges new. So imitation is not new. It's old, and it's taking stuff in, using that stuff, and then something new happens.
Yeah. So I was wondering about the imitation is also a different type of imitation. When we do the circle, they kind of like immediately, they just, very spontaneous imitation.
Right.
But when we give a story like 2 or 3 weeks, mm-hmm. and then about the 3 weeks, children imitating our story.
So imaginative play is like bringing it to being. So when they start playing on their own and bring out of their imagination, that's bringing into being, not just the imitation.
Yeah. So that's also they are doing this process and then bringing into being, right?
Right.
But the immediate imitation.
Right.
In a circle is a different.
Right.
So can you tell me again about that part?
Yeah, it's like you see when a child's first born, and they initially they scream, they have instinct, they scream, they kick, and all of this stuff, right? Now they're already, all this action is already working on their own body.
Yeah.
It's like me when I go lift weights, right? I go lift weights, I'm working on my own body, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of activities that children do when they're young, but that work is really working on them. They're not doing anything, bringing anything new. They're doing work to work on what they already have.
Oh, the process is standing up and walking.
Right. All of that is actually working on yourself, and you're so imitation is like that. It's just like if I go, but what happens over time is that kicking, screaming, and all those ways that we're working on ourselves, we begin to associate getting our needs met. So we begin to modify those actions. So those actions then begin to have two purposes. It achieves something in the world, but it also works on ourselves. Initially, it was fully just working, it was fully just internal. And then over time, it goes from being purely internal to having external consequences too. That's what learning is. Learning is, I learned that these random activities I do, parts of those random activities can get me fed, can get me a toy. And so, I imitate the adults. So I imitate the adults because I think the adults know best how to get my needs met. But all I'm doing is initially I'm just taking the instinctive actions, and I'm inhibiting, that's why we talk about that. We have all those reflexes that we inhibit. Mm-hmm. We do those tests to see if they're inhibiting. So initially, imitation, getting good at imitation, It's simply a question of being able to inhibit those reflexes.
Yeah.
To the degree that I can inhibit those reflexes, I can imitate better. But the actions themselves have already there. So this is the important thing. Imitation isn't new. It's old. It's like, an example. It's like when I imitate something. Say I have this. I do this. I have this action at birth. Mm-hmm. And what imitation is I realize that all of this stuff is useless. It doesn't get me any needs. So I inhibit all of that. Then all I have left is this and this. Now these actions look more productive, don't they? Mm-hmm. But they're still just the old actions. They're not new things. You see what I'm saying? I've inhibited a lot of this, so now I got something that looks really productive. But just because it looks productive doesn't mean it's new. It just means that I have eliminated all the unproductive stuff. Now, when this becomes new is when it comes out of my own imagination. When I utilize this productive activity to achieve and imagine, to express myself. That's when it's new. So imitation isn't new. Imitation is just imitation. We can call imitation. I'm going to give a definition of imitation. Imitation is the productive inhibition of primitive reflexes. That's what imitation is. So imitation is the productive inhibition. It's not an expression, it's an inhibition of primitive reflexes. We think it's expressive, but it's not expressive. When a child is born, they're born with all of these random reflexes, random movements. Mm-hmm. They learn to inhibit some of those random movements so that the ones that are left are productive. That's what imitation is. And that activity is working on their own bodies. Mm-hmm. Now, over time, they get a metamorphosis in the etheric. Some of the etheric gets released, and they begin to be able to have their own inner picturing and imagination. And then out of that imagination, they begin to choose certain productive actions. Then they're bringing into being. Then they're doing more than imitation.
That's why maybe we work a lot also try to find out the primitive reflexes. They are like children who really didn't release yet
the etheric.
Also inhibited reflexes.
Right, they don't have the inhibited reflexes, so they really aren't able to really have a good imagination. Because as you're inhibiting those reflexes, you are working. That's the work that you're doing on your organs too. That's just kind of the same time you learn to inhibit those reflexes. It means the same time you're forming your organs in a balanced way. And then once your organs are formed in a balanced way, you get the etheric free. You begin to have your own inner pictures that you can guide, and then you begin to use your body to express that. Then you're bringing something new into being.
So that's kind of like is that the same way the sculptor talk about I am not creating new things, I'm eliminating they don't need it, and then as a result.
Exactly, that's exactly the same thing. And that's what the child is doing up to the point of imitation. And then they want them to move beyond that.
See, that it is really, really hard part of, because when we do that kind of like a process of imitation, bringing new they are like bringing the prey to imitate. Mm-hmm. That children do more, but the immediate like a circle, it's very challenging.
Right. And that's and we can say that to a certain degree, the ability of the children to take life forces out of what we give them. So part of it is how much life force we put in it. And the other part is how much capacity they have to take the life forces out. Because that's what they're taking in. The taking in must lead to the adapting and breaking down. So we bring some curriculum, and it either has enough life so that there's something actually there for the children to get. It's not dead. And so we give them a living activity. They take the living activity in, and they have to extract the life force from it. And if they can't extract the life force from it, then they won't work with it. You know.
Yeah. So it happens also sometimes like when we do that at the beginning, like very familiar to the children, like nursery rhymes. Most of the children know somehow, and they really happily do it.
Right.
But if we bring in, they don't really know, and then we try to do and then do it, they really, very hard for them to.
And I think and sometimes in that case, like it's just like it's no different than going somewhere and hearing a different language, or going to someone's house and they have cultural things that you don't understand, and so you aren't able to see the life there. So either sometimes a place can be culturally dead, but other times it can be that you just don't have the capacity to see the life there and to draw it out.
Yeah.
And so that's always going to be the degree of engagement the children are going to have is always going to be due either to their lack of capacity to experience the life that's being brought, or that the thing that we're bringing has no life. It's going to be one or the other. And we have to ask ourselves, well, do I know that there's life in what I'm bringing? Well, if a child is not able to access that life, I got to understand them better.
That's happened exactly what you're talking about, falling language, because second semester, just one song, I usually bring in the Japanese song to not the circle, just before we eat snack. But just a little finger game I bring, a very short one.
Right.
And some children just follow, some children just resist. What is that? What is that? I don't understand.
Right.
Exactly what they do. They don't really, they don't want to do because they don't know.
Yeah.
But some children just adapt that, and then
right.
Doing it. And
and that's another good point, that adapting comes first, and they can't find the warmth in it.
Yeah.
So before they even try to life.
I do whole 1 month, and then finally at the end,
they're finally able to find some
warmth
warmth there. Yeah. So this is very much, we can very much connect it, these 5 life processes with how we're engaging the children and how they're receiving us, and have it as a way of thinking about it. We want to, as I finish reading this book, and we can get to more detail about all of this. But I think it's good to have a picture.
Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, because I just I could physically I could see what is primitive reflexes. Children are still inhibited. And then why we are putting the energy so much about that? It's just only therapeutic or?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, it is true that, there's a couple of things that happens. We have assimilation in terms of reflection. We have assimilation, accommodation, and we have compensation. Now, assimilation is when we have a primitive reflex, and we try to use that primitive reflex for everything. That's the same thing as, the one we always talk about is sucking reflex.
Yeah.
The child learns to suck, so they put everything in their mouth. So they're trying to assimilate all of their activity until they realize that maybe it's not productive to put everything in their mouth. So, and that's when, here's how it works. They do this, they have a schema to put everything in their mouth. And then this activity, they inhibit part of it by bringing in the eyes. They begin to look at what they put in their mouth. And that's an inhibition of the reflex. And so then they have a more productive action. And so they go from, that's called accommodation. So they go from assimilation to they make an accommodation. Whenever a reflex is inhibited, that means an accommodation has been made. They have changed the schema. They have adapted it by inhibiting part of it and keeping other parts of it. so that now it's productive. Now, compensation is when children learn to not inhibit the reflex, but hold their body against it. It's like, here's a compensation. A child doesn't learn to cross their midline, right? So they turn their body, or they turn a book. They're compensating for the reflex.
Yeah.
You know, they
that's a lot they do.
Right.
Children.
Right. And so most of us, to a certain degree, have compensated for some reflexes. So we couldn't grow up unless we can compensate a little bit, because we're not going to be perfectly inhibiting our reflexes.
Yeah.
So it depends on just how much you have to compensate, how much that creates stress in your life. And we want to look, and that means that to a certain degree, to the degree that we have compensated, it also means that our organs aren't well formed. This external stress is also a manifestation of the internal stress. And we don't really know, and to that degree, that means our etheric forces are not available. So we want to help the children inhibit reflexes as much as possible, so they can learn to accommodate and learn new ways of expressing themselves in the world.
They are doing less compensating.
Right.
But it's sometimes it's very hard to find out if is the child compensating or not. Some children do really well that way.
Right.
And then
exactly.
much later,
Yeah, it is sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we get some, there are certain things we can look for whenever they're doing something to hold tension. Like you can look at, do they stick their tongue out of their mouth? There's all these ways we can see the tension in their body. So even if we don't see the exact compensation, we can say, I see the tension. So they're compensating somewhere, even if we don't know exactly where. And so that's a lot of times you just want to see how much tension the child seems to hold in their body. And then maybe, like you said, sometimes we just won't be able to figure out how they're compensating.
Yeah.
Even if we know they're compensating, we might not be able to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
It could be even an internal compensation, like bellyache.
Yeah.
They're sending the stress to inwardly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't see them holding the stress outwardly, like sitting on something or holding something or pushing down with the point on the paper. These are all the ways we can sort of see the stress. But there may be ways we don't see the stress, because it's manifesting inwardly.
Yeah, after I could a little bit more understanding much later, but I could see a lot of in Julian too. He was compensating so much.
Right.
That was very tricky because we didn't think about it. Sometimes he kind of like a show it, and sometimes he show it. Oh, he can do it. Right.
And,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
So,
okay. Thank you.
So I think we got a good picture to start with that can be developed into something practical.
Yeah. Can I ask the last things about that assimilation child, sucking everything to understand what it is, and then the accommodation is, work.
Right.
And then compensation, what do they do then?
Well, in a sense, a compensation would be.
Oh, it's not really.
You're not really looking at something. You're somehow learning to hold. Rather than having a response to the eyes, you just kind of
do it.
Someone says don't suck. Like someone says don't suck your thumb, and so you learn to not suck your thumb. You haven't really had a response out of the senses.
So it's coming from here.
Right. It's not coming out of me. I do this and then my senses engage.
From outside force.
And then I say, and I can actually then take it in a different way. So it's not taking it in a different way. I'm not taking it in. I'm saying they told me not to put it in my mouth, so I'm not going to put it in my mouth.
But is that the action is not always the force from outside? Child do their own compensating?
Well, usually what it is a child needs to hold the reflex some kind of way. So they have the reflex to put it in the mouth, so they learn to hold it some kind of way. Like the easy one, like this one is drawing, and their hand wants to still do this, and so to keep their hand from doing it, they press down harder. So when compensation always involves some tension, some way that you're holding the body against the reflex. you don't have a real impulse to accommodate. There's not something new coming to your mind. Like I said, when you do this, suddenly your eyes start to engage and they begin to notice the object.
Mm-hmm.
And so now since my eyes are taking it in, I can change my behavior. And so something else has to be engaged to cause the reflex to accommodate to that new information that you're receiving. Otherwise, you just learn to hold it against it.
The same thing is that before they, pick things in the sack, they also find their own hands.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Because they don't see their own hand beforehand.
Yeah.
It's just a reflex. In a sense, the arm doesn't even exist because the arm is just taken up by the schema.
Yeah.
And then eventually the whole arm begins to exist more, and then you get more purposeful control over it.
I have a very strong memory about that. My older son Elias, when I don't know, I thought maybe he first time found out his hand. I was trying to come in, he was laying, and then when I was coming in, he was like looking at his hand for a long time. I couldn't go in because I felt something really precious, and I was just standing at the entrance of the room.
Right.
I was just watching him, and he was kind of
these are me.
Yeah, that was very strong memory I had. Yeah. Okay. So, is this work? Do you think it works